Hi everyone, the stories that you're going to hear in this video is a cross between Autism Real Talk subseries and the Things I Lose Sleep Over subseries. I started the Real Talk subseries in 2021, and for those of you who do not know, my subseries about Autism Real Talk is a subseries that I began for my Autism Awareness and Acceptance playlist in 2021. And it's a subseries about things that just enter my mind over the littlest of things that happen, and there's more detail in the card above when I introduced that subseries. And I got to thinking that all those stories in there are stories of things that I still lose sleep of, and I'm thinking that Autism Real Talk is really a sub-series to this series of things that I lose sleep over. So earlier today I was on YouTube and there was a recommended video about 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, the 118th element. And that's because I was watching a lot of chemistry videos lately. I didn't watch it yet, but in the thumbnail there was a picture who I assume was 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, the person that the element was named after. And that brought me back almost 6 years to my fall 2016 semester at Orange Coast College, where I took General Chemistry A in the lab, and it reminded me of a few harsh stories that happened in lab. And the reason why this video about 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 reminded me of this is because sometime in the beginning of the semester I was waiting to talk to the lab instructor. We all formed a line, and there's only one lab instructor and a whole bunch of us students, so we had to wait in a long line like every time that we had a question and we needed to confirm something. And so I was standing there talking to a friend that I made, and for one reason or another, I just recited all the periodic table elements, and she was looking back at the periodic table to test me. And so I went from hydrogen to 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, and the lab TA came up to me afterward and asked me, "Were you just reciting all the elements of the periodic table?" And I said yes, and I forget exactly what he said, but he said that he knows the person who knows 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, the person that 118 was named after or something like that, or did work for him. And so that's like small world right there. So the major thing that I still lose sleep over today occurred on November 17th, 2016. I was talking to my chemistry lab instructor, and the TA was right there, and I was like the last student in there. And I couldn't finish the experiment, but I was like wondering, is it going to be safe in my locker all weekend and such? And he said, "Oh yeah, it's going to be fine." And I was like, well, I hope it just doesn't evaporate or anything like that. So here's the thing, whatever was in the Erlenmeyer flask or the beaker, I forget which one we used, that's in my locker, contained solids. Now, if you know chemistry, do solids evaporate? No. And it was just an autistic thing. I mean, I have autism, and I misquote some of the most common sense stuff, and the TA just laughed. And to this day, it's like, come on, Matthew, I know that solids don't evaporate, only liquids do, and that TA laughed at me. So anyway, on November 8th, 2016, I was in lab, and it was election day, and the TA and a couple of the students were talking something about the Constitution and presidents and such. And since I have all of them memorized, and earlier that year I memorized the Constitution, I mean, not word for word, but I learned a lot about it, and so I thought I'd chime in, the details of which are unimportant for this video. But it was just some neat facts about the Constitution, what's in between the lines, and a couple of former presidents. And the TA just looked at me and said, "What does this have to do with lab?" And I blurted out, "Nothing." And he wasn't expecting that answer. He kind of chuckled. And in my mind, I'm like, well, you're the one talking to a couple of the classmates. The classmates are trying to do lab, and they're talking back to you. So I just thought I'd chime in real quick. And then he turned his character and said, "What does this have to do with lab?" So I surmised that was November 2016 that set the tone, because there was a third event that happened. It was November 22nd, 2016. I just got to know over these flu-like symptoms, and there was a quiz, like a lab quiz or a lecture quiz. And I was just sitting down at my station, and all of a sudden I feel a forceful tap on my shoulder, and I turned around and it was the TA passing the quizzes. And he asked me, "Is that yours?" pointing to my stuff on the lab bench, I guess my textbook and notebook and such. And I said yes, and he said one word, "floor," very forcefully. So I put my stuff on the floor, and he continued to pass out quizzes. And a couple of stations down was a friend of mine from high school, and she had stuff on her lab bench too, but he just walked by. He looked at it, I saw him look at it, but he just walked by and didn't tell her to put her stuff on the floor. So those are the stories I've been holding in for almost 6 years since I took that chemistry lab. And again, nothing against the TA. I hope that everything goes well in his career, in his medical career. But those stories are things that kept me up at night for the past almost 6 years.